Hold a skull in your hands. Not a metaphor. An actual skull, 30,000 years old, pulled from a limestone cave in France. Now, hold a modern human skull beside it. Look inside. The ancient one is bigger. Not slightly bigger. Not a rounding error. On average, close to 100 cubic centimeters bigger, roughly the size of a tennis ball's worth of missing tissue. Somewhere in the last 20,000 years, the human brain got smaller. And nobody agreed on why. Most people assume evolution only moves in one direction. Forward, upward, bigger brains, better tools, smarter species. That is not what the fossil record shows. Homo sapiens, at the peak of the Ice Age, carried a brain larger than yours, larger than mine, larger, in fact, than any brain in the history of our species, before or since. And then it shrank. Something happened to the human mind, and we still do not fully understand what. Picture a hunter 22,000 years ago, standing at the edge of a frozen steppe in what is now Ukraine, wind moving through mammoth bone huts. No writing, no permanent settlements, no safety net beyond the next kill. His brain, if we could measure it, would outsize yours by a meaningful margin. He could not read. He had no calculus. He would never see a city. And yet, by the menu architecture of his skull, he was carrying more neural tissue than you are right now. This is the part that unsettles anthropologists. Bigger did not mean better in any simple sense. It meant something else. Something the modern world quietly made unnecessary. For over a century, scientists treated brain size as a scoreboard. Bigger brain, higher intelligence, clearer story. Then researchers began measuring skulls across time, not across species, but within our own. And the graph did something nobody expected. It rose. It peaked. Around 20,000 years ago, near the height of the last ice age, human brain volume hit its maximum. Then, slowly, consistently, across every continent it has been tested on, it declined. The decline was not sudden. It was not a single event. It was a long, quiet erosion, spanning millennia, and it has never fully stopped. The first instinct is to search for a villain, a disease, a bottleneck, a catastrophe that damaged the species. But nothing in the fossil record points to collapse. The opposite, in fact. This shrinking began right as human societies were becoming more complex, not less. Agriculture, trade, language networks stretching across regions. The birth of what we would eventually call civilization. The human brain got smaller, precisely as human society got bigger. That is the paradox sitting at the center of this mystery. And it forces an uncomfortable question. What if intelligence was never really about the size of the organ carrying it? Consider the Ice Age hunter again. Every day was an unstructured examination with no answer key. Where is the herd moving? What does that cloud formation mean for tomorrow's hunt? Which plants are poison and which ones heal? How do you keep a fire alive through a night that could kill you in under an hour? There was no one to ask. No stored external memory. No specialist to outsource the thinking to. His brain was the entire infrastructure. Every function modern humans have offloaded. To books, to calendars, to other people, to devices in our pockets. He had to run natively, alone in real time, with his life as the stake on the table. Some researchers now believe that raw cognitive load, not innate intelligence, may explain the size difference. A brain built to survive without a safety net may simply require more tissue than a brain built to survive inside a system that remembers things for you. This idea has a name in evolutionary biology: cognitive offloading, and it comes with a disturbing companion theory, one drawn not from human fossils at all, but from animals. Domesticated species, dogs compared to wolves, sheep compared to their wild ancestors, consistently show smaller brains than their wild counterparts, not because they became less capable of surviving, because they no longer needed to survive alone. The moment a species starts relying on a group, a system, a hierarchy, a support structure larger than the individual brain appears to need less raw processing power to get through the day. Some scientists now ask the question quietly, almost reluctantly. Did humans, over the last 20,000 years, domesticate themselves? Sit with that for a moment. Not domesticated by another species, domesticated by our own creation, society itself. As villages became cities, as strangers began cooperating without needing to personally verify every threat, as law, memory, and knowledge became externalized into language, writing, and eventually institutions, the individual human no longer needed to carry the entire cognitive burden alone. The tribe remembered, the elders remembered. Later, the books remembered. The brain that once had to run the full simulation of survival by itself was, slowly, being relieved of the job. And organs that are relieved of a job, across evolutionary time, tend to shrink. But this theory alone does not fully satisfy researchers, and here the story deepens rather than resolves. Because brain size and brain efficiency are not the same measurement. A 2021 analysis comparing skull evolution found that even as total volume decreased, the internal proportions shifted. The regions tied to social reasoning, language, and long-term planning appear to have reorganized rather than simply shrunk uniformly. In other words, we may not have lost capacity. We may have restructured it. Like a company that downsizes its physical office while quietly becoming more efficient through better internal systems, the human brain may have traded raw volume for architecture. Smaller, but differently wired. Still, this raises something colder, harder to sit with. If a Paleolithic hunter's brain outsized a modern human's brain, and if that brain was tuned for constant, unfiltered environmental awareness, pattern recognition, danger assessment, survival calculus running in permanent background, then in some narrow, specific sense, that hunter may have processed his immediate physical world more completely than we do. Not smarter in the way we define it now, but more awake to it, more continuously alert to weather, terrain, sound, and threat than a species that has spent millennia learning it is safe enough not to notice. There is a strange grief hidden inside that fact. Because if intelligence adapts to necessity, then comfort itself may be quietly reshaping us. Every convenience that removes a decision, every system that remembers, so we do not have to, every technology that answers a question before we finish forming it. Each one may be, in the smallest measurable way, continuing a process that began 20,000 years ago on a frozen steppe. We are not the same brain that built the first tools, painted the first caves, buried the first dead with flowers and ochre. We are something else, reorganized, networked, distributed across billions of other minds and machines. Whether that is evolution or erosion may depend entirely on what we choose to still remember how to do ourselves. Somewhere in a museum drawer, a 30,000-year-old skull sits in the dark, denser and heavier than it has any right to be. It does not know it is evidence of anything. It does not know a species once stood alone against an entire indifferent world and thought its way through hour by hour with nothing but the brain inside its own skull. It only knows what it always knew. That once, not so long ago, being human required carrying the whole world in your head. We built a world that carries it for us instead. And somewhere in that trade, quietly, without ceremony, part of us got smaller. Like and subscribe. See you in the next.